Dad clinked his glass right in the middle of dinner. Turkey still steaming, everyone mid-bite. He rose slowly, smiled like a king addressing peasants. "I'm a blessed man," he said. "I have 2 sons, a doctor." He nodded toward my brother Julian, and a nobody. The room erupted in the nervous kind of laughter, the kind people force out when they're scared of the wrong silence. Julian raised his wine glass like he'd just been knighted, comfortable, settled. My face burned. But what broke me wasn't the insult itself. It was the casual shrug Dad gave afterward, like he hadn't just erased me at a table full of family, like it wasn't even worth thinking about. I stood up to leave, pushed my chair back quietly. Dad's voice followed me. "Don't be dramatic, Milo." My name in his mouth felt like a leash being yanked. I walked out anyway, through the front door into the cold evening air, and just as the door closed behind me, I heard my aunt's voice. "Low, careful. He doesn't know about the papers." I stopped on the porch steps. The papers. I didn't know what that meant yet, but something in her tone told me it mattered. "My name is Milo Kessler. I've been the spare son since I was old enough to understand what applause was and who it was never directed toward." My girlfriend Sienna was waiting in the driveway. She took one look at my face and reached for my hand. "You okay?" "I'm fine." Standard answer, the one I'd been trained to give since childhood. She didn't push, just held my hand tighter. My phone buzzed before I could start the engine. "Mom, please come back inside. You're upsetting your father." I stared at that text for a long time. My pain was the inconvenience. My hurt feelings were the problem to be managed. Not what Dad had said. Not Julian's comfortable smirk. Me. I put the phone face down on the console. Then I noticed Dad standing at the front window, just watching me in the dark, like I was a problem he hadn't quite figured out how to solve yet. I turned the key. Then Sienna said quietly, "Your grandma called me earlier, while you were inside." I looked at her. "She sounded scared," Sienna said. "Milo, your grandma doesn't scare easy. People in my family believe a myth. The myth is that my brother Julian earned everything through brilliance and sacrifice, and that I never tried, never applied myself, never wanted more than hauling tools and getting my hands dirty. Nobody wakes up at 5 in the morning and watches me work. Nobody counts the renovation projects I've completed, the crew I've kept employed through slow seasons, the rental properties I've fixed for Dad over the years, for free, so he could look like a smart investor at dinner parties. But that's the story they tell, and everyone has repeated it so many times that it started sounding like truth." On the drive to Grandma's that night, Sienna said something quietly. "He needs you small, Milo, because if you were seen clearly, the comparison would go differently." Her words settled somewhere deep in my chest. Then she added, "What did your grandma actually say when she called?" "She didn't say much, but she mentioned Dad had come by earlier. Brought papers." Sienna went still. I pressed harder on the gas. Because Dad doesn't bring papers to simplify things. He brings papers to take things. Grandma Evelyn's front door was unlocked. It was never unlocked. She'd been locking her door religiously for 30 years. Said she'd learned that lesson the hard way decades ago and never needed to relearn it. I pushed it open carefully, called her name, found her in her recliner, trembling, eyes glassy, wrapped in a blanket, even though the house was warm. "Your father came by this afternoon," she whispered. "What did he want?" She pointed to her side table. A neat stack of documents sat there, organized, official-looking, waiting, unsigned. "He said it was just to simplify things," Evelyn said, "to make managing everything easier going forward." My hands went cold. I picked up the papers, started scanning. Dad didn't simplify, he accumulated. Evelyn reached out and grabbed my wrist with both hands. Her grip was firmer than I expected. "Promise me," she said. "Promise me you won't let him turn me into a bank account." "I promise." She held my wrist a moment longer. Then she looked down at the papers in my other hand and said softly, "There's a corner folded. On the 3rd page." He folded it himself, I noticed. I unfolded the corner on page 3. Hidden beneath it, in dense legal language, was a clause about transferring property interest. Immediate transfer. No conditions. No timeline for review. That wasn't simplification. That was a quiet robbery disguised in formal language. I sat down on the edge of Evelyn's coffee table. "Grandma, did you sign anything at all? Anything he brought before today?" She shook her head slowly. "No. He said I should trust him. He's my son. She wiped her eyes, but something felt wrong. Something always feels wrong now when he visits. We're going to see an attorney, I told her. Tomorrow morning, first thing. She nodded. Then she said something that sent ice through my veins. Julian was here too. Came in with your father. But he didn't look at me once the entire time. The doctor's son. Couldn't even manufacture concern well enough to maintain eye contact with his own grandmother. I sat with Evelyn until she fell asleep in her chair. Then I photographed every page of those documents and drove home with my jaw clenched the whole way. The attorney's name was Marla Vance. Someone Sienna had tracked down after an hour of research. A state law specialist. Sharp, no nonsense from the moment we walked through her door. She read the documents I'd brought, didn't rush, read every page twice. Then she exhaled through her nose. The sound of someone who had seen this exact movie before and found it no less disturbing the second time. Your father attempted to have her sign away full property control under the framing of estate simplification, she said. That's not simplification, that's aggressive repositioning of assets. She asked Evelyn directly who she trusted. Evelyn didn't hesitate, looked straight at me. Milo. Marla walked us through options. Power of attorney, healthcare directives, a formal will review, protective documentation. As she spoke, something shifted in my chest. Dad wasn't the author of this story. He just acted like he was. Counted on everyone else believing it too. Then Marla slid a folder across her desk. There's already a will on file, she said. Older document. Valid. And it doesn't match what I understand your father has been telling people about the family's inheritance plans. My throat tightened. What does it say? The will was dated years back. Before Dad had started his campaign of casually mentioning at family dinners how the estate would naturally stay in the right hands. Marla walked us through the language carefully. It was thoughtful. Protective. Written by someone who had observed her family clearly and made deliberate choices. It wasn't structured to automatically reward titles or professional prestige. It was designed to reward presence. To reward the person who showed up consistently, who provided care, who was actually there. Dad had been telling people at church and family gatherings for at least 2 years that the estate was essentially promised to him and Julian, that Evelyn had always wanted it that way. This document told a completely different story. Marla said, if your father has seen this will or suspects its contents, he would have strong motivation to move quickly before it could be executed. I laughed once. Short. Stunned. He's already moving. Then my phone rang. Dad's name on the screen. I looked at Marla. She looked back steadily. I answered. Dad's voice was sweet, smooth, warm, which was exactly how I knew it was dangerous. He only turned on the warmth when he needed something or when he was laying groundwork. Son, your grandmother mentioned you've been helping her with some legal matters. Helping, said with just enough lightness to imply I was an overstepping nuisance. We're making sure she's protected, I said. His tone shifted, 1 degree, just enough. Protected from what? Her own family? In the background, I could hear Julian's voice. Low, coaching. Dad continued, come by tonight, just us, we'll talk like men. I told him I'd think about it. Hung up. Marla said immediately, don't go alone. I understood why she said it. I went anyway, because I needed to understand how far they were actually willing to go. I needed to see it clearly with my own eyes, not through documents or secondhand information. I needed to be in the room and watch my father's face when he decided I was too small to be a threat worth managing carefully. That was information I couldn't get any other way. Dad didn't offer me a seat when I arrived. Julian sat relaxed on the couch like he'd been there for hours. Comfortable. Already settled in his role. Dad paced, talked about respect, about gratitude, about what family owed each other. Then the real point arrived. Evelyn's memory isn't what it was, he said carefully. If someone's been filling her head with ideas, confusing her about what she wants, that's actually a serious legal issue. My stomach flipped. He was pre-building a narrative, positioning himself to claim I'd been manipulating her. Julian finally spoke. You don't understand how serious this could get for you, Milo. I looked at my brother. The concern on his face was completely manufactured. He wasn't worried about Grandma. He was worried about losing control of the outcome. It's interesting, I said. You didn't look concerned when Dad called me a nobody at the dinner table. Dad smiled. Truth hurts. Julian's smirk confirmed it. They thought they'd won. Then Dad leaned back and said the sentence that changed every calculation I'd made walking in there. That old will? It won't matter. He said it again. Slower. It won't matter. Too confident, too specific. He shouldn't have known there was an old will to reference. Not unless he'd already found it, already read it. Unless he was already working on replacing it or invalidating it somehow. I kept my face completely neutral. What old will? Dad paused. Just a fraction. A hair-thin hesitation. Julian's eyes snapped him, a flash of irritation. Dad recovered. Your grandmother writes things down. She gets confused. It doesn't mean anything. I left without arguing further. Outside, Sienna was waiting in my truck. She looked at my face and knew immediately. What happened? He mentioned the will, I said. By implication, he knows it exists. Sienna's voice dropped. Then they're already trying to do something about it. My phone buzzed. A text from Grandma's neighbor. A woman named Patrice who had Evelyn's spare key and checked on her sometimes. Your father's car is at your grandmother's house, right now. I was already starting the engine before I finished reading. I drove hard. Sienna gripped the door handle but didn't say a word. When I pulled up, both cars were there, Dad's and Julian's, side by side on the curb. I walked in without knocking. Found Evelyn standing in the center of her living room. Pale. A pen in her hand. Dad looming over her like a shadow the whole room was shaped around. Julian stood near the window, arms folded, watching. There you are, Dad said, loud. Too bright? We're just helping your grandmother update a few things. Evelyn's eyes found mine immediately. The look of someone underwater. I walked between her and my father. Put the pen down, Grandma. Dad's warmth snapped off like a switch. Don't you dare walk in here and tell my mother what to do. Julian stepped forward. You're the one manipulating her. This is exactly the behavior we were talking about. Dad pointed at me. This is why you're a nobody. You can't stay in your lane. I raised my voice for the first time, not screaming, but clear. Get out. Evelyn's hand opened. The pen dropped onto the carpet. Dad's eyes narrowed, and he said softly, You just made yourself an enemy inside your own family. Marla moved fast once I told her what had happened. Emergency protective documentation, formal witness statements, locked down legal access to Evelyn's accounts pending review. A paper trail establishing clearly that any documents signed under duress would be challenged. Evelyn came to stay with me and Sienna. Just temporarily, she said. But she admitted that she hadn't felt safe alone in her house for weeks. That first night she sat at my kitchen table and held her tea with both hands. He used to be sweet, she said. Your father. Her voice cracked slightly at the edges. Then somewhere he learned that people listen when he's loud, and kind stopped working for him. I squeezed her hand. We're not playing loud this time. We're playing smart. She nodded. Later, when I was doing the dishes, Sienna came into the kitchen quietly. Milo. Her voice was careful. I turned around. She was holding a small envelope she'd found in the outside pocket of Evelyn's overnight bag. Pale yellow, sealed, written on the front in Evelyn's handwriting. If something happens to me. We looked at each other. Then I called Marla. The envelope held a handwritten list, dates, dollar amounts, short notes beside each entry. And next to several of the largest withdrawals, 2 letters that made my stomach turn. Dad's initials. Evelyn had been tracking it herself, quietly, carefully, for over a year. She sat across from me while I read it and whispered, I thought I was losing my mind. I kept trying to figure out where the money was going. I thought maybe I was misremembering. But I wasn't. The list wasn't just evidence. It was a year of a woman doubting her own memory, while someone she trusted was stealing from her. We brought it to Marla the next morning. Marla's expression went completely still and cold as she read. This constitutes financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, she said. If we pursue it formally, your father faces serious criminal and civil exposure. I hesitated, because somewhere underneath all of it, I still had a complicated piece of myself that wanted a father. Evelyn looked at me, her eyes steady. Milo, I'm tired of protecting people who don't protect me. I nodded. Marla said, then we proceed. My phone buzzed. Julian, Dad's not playing anymore. By Sunday, the family group chat was burning. A cousin posted, "Heard Milo's trying to cut the family out of Grandma's estate." An aunt responded, "Julian said Milo's girlfriend has been influencing Evelyn." My name in messages. My character described in other people's words. Julian feeding them a script and watching them perform it. Dad called my old boss from 2 years ago. A casual call, framed as concern, asking how I'd been, whether I was stable, whether there had been any issues. Humiliation dressed up as worry. At the next family gathering I showed up alone, calm, said nothing when the whispers faded as I walked in. Dad greeted me with a wide smile, extended his hand. "Here's our caregiver," he said warmly. The word carved like a slur. Then he leaned close, "Just for me. If you want to play legal games with me, I know how to play doctor games." Julian stood across the room, lifted his chin slightly, and I understood completely. They weren't just attacking Grandma's estate. They were coming for my credibility, my business, my reputation, everything I'd built while they were busy deciding I was nothing. A formal complaint arrived at my renovation company 3 days later. Anonymous, filed through a regulatory channel. It alleged unsafe work practices. Detailed, specific enough to be malicious, vague enough to be difficult to immediately disprove. My inspector friend called me. "Someone wants you shut down. This doesn't read like a real complaint, it reads like a project." Sienna looked at me across the kitchen and said one word, "Julian." I didn't want to believe it. Then Julian texted me a link to a news article about contractor fraud. No message, just the link. I drove to a neutral location and met him in a parking lot. Asked him directly. He smiled, easy, professional, like we were discussing weather. "You're being emotional about this, Milo. That's why Dad trusts me more. You react, I think." Then he added, softer, "Just walk away. Let Dad have what he wants from the estate. You keep your business, you keep your life, everyone moves on." "No." Julian tilted his head. "Then you'll lose what you've built." He walked back to his car, and as he did I noticed something clipped to his belt behind his hospital ID. A small flash drive, tucked behind it like a secret. I couldn't stop thinking about that flash drive. A week later, Evelyn had a medical appointment, scheduled by Dad conveniently at Julian's hospital. I insisted on going. In the hallway outside the exam room I heard Julian speaking in a low voice to a nurse. "Make sure confusion is documented clearly. If she contradicts herself, note it." My hands went completely numb. He was manufacturing evidence that Grandma lacked mental capacity, building a paper trail to challenge the will, to claim she hadn't been in sound mind when it was written or when she'd given me her trust. I stepped back. Julian turned and saw me. His smile disappeared. Later, when Julian stepped away from his office and left the door open, I walked past and looked in. His laptop was open, patient files on screen, and the flash drive was plugged in. One file was visible on the screen. The name, Evelyn Capacity Notes. I didn't enter the office, just raised my phone from the doorway, recorded the screen clearly through the opening. Julian appeared behind me. "What are you doing?" I kept my voice level. "Protecting my grandmother." His face went white. "Delete that." "Make me." Dad called an intervention at his house. Extended family assembled like a jury, aunts, uncles, cousins, all the people who'd laughed at Dad's Thanksgiving toast. Evelyn came with me, held my arm as we walked in. Dad opened with manufactured sadness, voice heavy with concern. "We love you, Milo, but you've been destabilizing this family. You've become unclear in your judgment." Heads nodded, because nodding was easier than thinking. Julian produced printed notes, clinical sounding, typed, describing Evelyn as confused, suggesting she was being influenced beyond her capacity to make decisions. Evelyn stood up from her seat, voice trembling but completely clear. "I know exactly what I want. I have always known exactly what I want." Dad snapped without thinking. "Sit down, Mother." The room heard the cruelty in it. Something shifted. I could feel it. Faces changed. I said calmly, "We have an attorney, and we have financial records." Dad's eyes flashed. "Records can be misunderstood or manipulated." Then my aunt blurted, "What about the withdrawals?" Silence dropped like a blade. Julian interrupted fast, but the seed was already planted. Afterward, a cousin pulled me aside. "If you have real proof, I'll testify." Dad's voice boomed immediately behind me. "Nobody has private conversations here." 2 nights later, I came home to find the front door open. My stomach dropped before I even stepped inside. Nothing valuable was gone. No electronics, no jewelry, just one thing. Evelyn's yellow envelope, and the handwritten list inside it. Sienna stood in the kitchen with her hand over her mouth. Evelyn sat down slowly, her voice barely a whisper. He took my words. The rage I felt was enormous. Then it steadied into something colder and more useful. They'd broken in because they were scared. You only steal evidence when you know it can destroy you. I called Marla immediately. We filed a police report, documented the missing items, locked everything down digitally. I sat on the couch feeling helpless. Then Sienna appeared in the doorway, her laptop open. Milo, her voice was quiet but certain. I scanned the entire list. The first night she arrived, I scanned every page. I stared at her. She turned the laptop around, every page. Clear. Time-stamped by the scanning software. My legs nearly gave out. Dad could steal paper. He could not steal what was already backed up 3 places and in Marla's possession by morning. Marla told me we needed more than documents. We needed intent captured clearly. She needed Dad to say out loud what he was planning. He gave it to me without knowing. He called from an unfamiliar number a few days later. He didn't bother easing into it. "You're humiliating me," he said. "End this now." I kept my voice level. "Return what you took from Evelyn." He laughed. Actually laughed. "She owes me. Everything she has exists because I managed it, protected it, kept it organized for years. I'm entitled to what I'm owed." My phone was recording every word. "And Julian can document whatever the medical record needs to say. Doctors are believed, Milo. That's just reality." I closed my eyes for 1 second. There it was. Spoken clearly. Admitted casually. The plan laid out because he assumed I was powerless to use it. He hung up. I sat completely still for a moment. Then I sent the audio file to Marla. Her reply came within 4 minutes. "This changes the entire scope of what we can pursue. Call me first thing tomorrow." Then, Julian texted, "Dad says you won't like what comes next." It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Evelyn was walking out to check the mailbox when she slipped on the front steps. She wasn't hurt badly. Shaken, confused. But she looked at me and said quietly, "Something moved under my foot. I don't know. Something felt wrong." I inspected the steps carefully, found a slick residue on the 3rd step, concentrated, not rain. Something applied. Sienna was crying by the time I came back inside, angry, shaking tears. I wanted to drive straight to Dad's house, wanted to shout until something broke. Instead, I bought cameras that night. Professional quality, installed them myself. Every angle covered, every approach to the house, every corner. If someone came back, the lens would catch them. 2 nights later at 2:13 a.m. the motion alert woke me. I opened the app with shaking hands. Someone in a dark hood on my porch, moving slowly, pausing under the light. Then the hood slipped, half a second, but the camera caught it clearly. The face wasn't Dad's, it was Julian's. Marla reviewed everything in one session. The footage, the capacity notes file on Julian's hospital laptop, the recorded phone call, the financial list, the break-in report, the slick substance on my porch steps. She set everything down, looked at me for a long moment. "We can file for an emergency protective injunction and open a formal investigation simultaneously. But I need you to understand what that means for your family." I looked at Evelyn. She looked back at me and said softly, "He made these choices, Milo. You didn't make them for him." We filed. Within days, Julian's hospital compliance department contacted him about irregularities in patient documentation handling. Dad called constantly. I let every call go to voicemail. Then Dad organized a family lunch, framed as making peace, olive branch. I went. He gave a performance. Actual tears. Public grief about losing his son. People around the table softened visibly. Then I took out my phone, hit play. Dad's voice filled the room. "She owes me. Julian can document whatever the medical record needs to say." The pity on their faces drained completely. Dad went rigid. Julian's chair scraped back as he stood. Dad screamed, "You set me up!" in front of everyone, and everyone heard it. Marla scheduled the formal will review, notified all required parties. Dad received his notification by certified mail. He appeared at my house that same evening, pounding on the door. The cameras caught everything from the moment he pulled up. I opened the door a crack with my phone recording. "You're not welcome here right now," I told him. He laughed, like it was absurd, like I couldn't possibly mean it. Then Evelyn stepped into view behind me, small, steady, completely certain. "Go home, son." Something moved across his face that I'd never seen there before. He looked exposed, entitled and frightened at the same time. After everything I've done for you, he started. Everything I've managed, everything I've protected, you owe me this. Evelyn's voice was quiet. Everything you took? His mouth opened and closed. He looked at me, dropped his voice to something that was almost a hiss. You'll regret this. I met his eyes directly. No, Dad, you will. He left. The next day his pastor called me asking for my perspective, wanting to understand, trying to broker something. Dad's public image was fracturing. People were asking questions he didn't have good answers for. The attorney's conference room was small for everything we'd carried into it. Dad sat with arms crossed, jaw clenched, Julian beside him, pale, still. Marla read the will aloud, every clause, every condition. The language was careful and clear, designed to protect, designed to reward presence and genuine care. Then the line that changed everything in the room. Executor of estate, Milo Kessler. Dad's face twitched like he'd been physically struck. Not Julian, not Dad. Me. Marla continued. The house would enter a protective trust managed by the executor for Evelyn's care. Remainder of estate assets to transfer to the person who served as primary caregiver. Documentation and witness statements required. Dad stood up before she finished, voice booming. This document is fraudulent. This is manipulation of an elder. I'll have this contested in every court. Marla slid 3 pages across the table, the scanned financial list, the audio transcript, the bank records. Evelyn has included an addendum addressing suspected financial exploitation, Marla said. Any formal challenge will trigger the no contest clause and automatically forfeit all potential claims. Dad's mouth opened. No sound arrived. Julian's hands were shaking visibly. Dad sat back down like his legs had simply stopped working. For the first time in my life, his presence didn't fill the room. It shrank. Julian's hospital opened a formal investigation into improper documentation practices and unauthorized data handling. Dad tried to hold the family together. Called meetings, sent messages. But they'd heard his voice in that recording, watched him explode at the family lunch, seen his face when the will was read. The spell was broken. Relatives who'd laughed at the Thanksgiving toast stopped returning his calls. He showed up at my work site one afternoon, walked up to my crew like I wasn't standing right there. I called the police calmly. Non-emergency. Just a trespass situation that needed documentation. Watched him get escorted away while he was still insisting he was the real victim. It felt surreal. Later, Julian sent me a text. You destroyed us. I stared at those 3 words for a long time. Then I typed back the only thing that was true. No? You did. That night, Evelyn sat beside me on the couch, close enough that her shoulder touched mine. She looked out the window at nothing in particular. I forgot what quiet felt like, she said finally. I forgot what it felt like when I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. I put my arm around her shoulders. You're safe now, I said. And I meant it completely. The following Thanksgiving was different in every way. Small table, real food, no performances. Sienna and I cooked together. Evelyn sat at the kitchen counter and instructed us on proper gravy technique and refused to accept our substitutions. We burned the rolls slightly, laughed about it for 10 minutes. No speeches prepared in advance. No seating arrangements designed to establish hierarchy. No toasts meant to remind someone of their position. Evelyn raised her glass of sparkling cider near the end of the meal. To the ones who show up, she said simply. My throat tightened. I thought about Dad's toast. Doctor and nobody. Said with that casual shrug, like I wasn't worth real contempt. Just casual dismissal. For years that sentence had lived in my chest like a verdict. Now it just sounded like a language I no longer needed to understand. I don't know if Dad will change. I genuinely don't. I don't know if Julian will ever say out loud what he did and own it. But I know this. I stopped chasing their version of me a long time ago. I'm building something they cannot control. And the camera on my porch recorded nothing that night but wind moving through the yard. Because for the first time in my life, nobody was coming to take anything from my door.